for the politically aware.
Welcome to Sacred Matrix, a divine paradigm of love and universal consciousness, with your host, Janet Kira Lesson and Dr. Sasha Lesson.
Together, we transform the world.
And now, here are your hosts, Janet Kira and Dr. Sasha Lesson.
Hi, Grant. It's Janet.
Yeah, super. I don't know why my thing isn't picking up here. But anyway.
Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can.
Super. That's what we need.
Good. Well, we managed to get on the air despite the hurricanes. So I know Thomas Becker is right down there, the tip of Florida.
Oh, my goodness.
And hopefully... But they won't reach
I'm at the top. It ain't going to really hit me until tomorrow.
Tomorrow. Yeah. So
okay. Do the show and then run.
Yeah, do the show and then run for the hills.
Well, this is one of the times I know that most of us taking our psychic power tests zapped clouds. We sat on our back porches and said, let's get that cloud over there. So, and that's in a way how thought can truly zap particular clouds. We have a friend who's making the storm go around her house. I'm very curious to see if it's going to work.
Yeah, let's see if it works. I hope it does. Yeah. Oh, if it's going away around friend A's house, it means going to somebody else's house. So that's need to get it completely back out into space or something. Anyway, we're here today, and the power is still on in the East Coast. So it's out in some parts, but it's still out. It's still on where Thomas Becker, Mad Painter, is, and we're able to broadcast, and we're so grateful for that. And we have our dear friend, Grant Cameron. And Grant, you've been on our shows many, many, many times, and so listeners just go to aquarianradio.com and search for Grant Cameron in my little search box there, and you'll see a bunch of times that Grant's been on our shows. And Grant has first of all, Grant is an incredible author and researcher in the UFO phenomenon, and he's written, I don't know how many books you've written, you'll have to tell us, Grant, but and the latest book is, or this might not be the latest, Grant's been cranking out books about once every two or three or four times a year now, it seems. Charlie Red Star, the true reports of one of North America's biggest UFO sightings. And this was published September 5th, so this might be the latest book. And a wave of UFO sightings struck southern Manitoba in 1975 with possible connections to U.S. missile defense operations. Manitobans in 75 reported UFOs over their province almost nightly. The string of unprecedented sightings launched the biggest UFO craze in Canadian history. With sightings for well over a year, one object seen again and again became known as Charlie Red Star. So Grant was there. He witnessed Charlie Red Star many times and led tours for others to see for themselves. He also caught wind of rumors of nuclear testing south of the Canada-U.S. border, which might have been the cause of the unexplained phenomenon that was sighted in the upper atmosphere. And this is a story revealed by eyewitnesses, photographers, and reporters chasing down the truth behind these still unexplained encounters with UFOs. And what would you like to say, Sasha, before we bring on Grant?
Oh, we're really excited to. It's so interesting in this field. Any reasonable person would say, look at all this evidence of some other consciousness than the regular earthbound that we're used to operating here, and yet people are still doubting what would stand up in any court of law, witnesses, many witnesses, physical evidence. It blows my mind. So we just keep parading the evidence, I guess.
Welcome, Grant.
Well, thanks for having me on, and I totally agree with Sasha there, although I'm starting to think that maybe the intelligence behind the phenomena is always giving the skeptics an out. It's like they don't quite land on the White House lawn, but they sort of drop these breadcrumbs. And I've even heard this from some experiencers where they say that they don't provide the absolute proof because they want to always allow the people who really have their doubts to walk away. I've just come up against another one of these bizarre cases where you're up against this sort of wall of denial, and I know what you saw, and it's like, wow, it's just like I almost like I still want to try to get out of the UFO field. I'm just desperately trying to get out because it has this negative sort of vibration, and I figure it's sort of like the way I describe it is sort of like walking through the Vietnam, and your buddy in front of you steps on a landmine and blows up, and you get covered with his body parts and whatever. And if you keep running that, even though it may be true what people are saying, you keep running that stuff through your head, and after a while, suddenly you become suicidal yourself. It's like, it's just, there's sort of this, and you know what it's like. I mean, it's like this sort of constant war. Anything you say, 10 people jump up and will tell you what you saw and how they know and you saw, or this thing, I know and you just believe. And it's like, no, it's the other way around. I was there. I know what happened. You're the guy that's the believer, based upon some scientific Sunday school story you heard, or religious Sunday school story you heard, or whatever your predisposition is. But it's so constant in the UFO field that I'm always trying to get out since 2012. And I thought this would be my last UFO book, and now it's like it didn't even last like a week, and suddenly I'm dragged back into another story that I have to do, which I'll probably talk about tonight, which actually relates to this book, which is kind of weird, because the book is actually the story.
Grant, because you're such an incredible researcher. You can think on levels that most people can't. You can go into it and analyze it and approach it from different angles. And most people come from within the box and they can't figure it out and they can't see it. But you're able to go outside of the box and look at all the different aspects. And I also enjoy talking to you several times a year. So please stay in the field so we can have you back on.
Yeah, well, we can talk about other things if I get out, but it's like the book that we're talking about tonight is the one that basically sort of ended my normal life. And everybody has their experience. You have your experiences, I have mine, where everybody else sort of goes on with their life and just as busy making a dollar and putting their kids in soccer and all this kind of stuff, and basically just living an ordinary life. And then we have these experiences that sort of throw us off the edge of the earth. And I still I do the Wayne Dyer thing where I say 3 thank yous every day. One, that I actually we're allowed to exist. Number 2, that I'm eternal. And number 3, that I got to play in the most amazing story of all times. That it could have been just an ordinary person who just busy out there trying to make a life for myself and pay the bills and worrying about nothing else. And yet we get to experience this phenomena where you're looking all the time at what is reality, why am I here, where am I going, all these sort of great philosophical questions that we face all the time. So what happened with this book is that the Charlie Red Star book is this is a book that was supposed to be published in the 1970s and never got published. And it's the story of I'm at university, don't know what I'm going to do at university, totally I make the joke about doing calculus, and it was like, where did the numbers go? Like, how am I ever going to make any money out of this? This is like total nonsense. What's this function nonsense? And I just university to me was just like I couldn't figure out, like, how do you make a buck with the stuff they were teaching me? And then what happens is this sightings start in a town called Carmen, Manitoba, and we are just north of North Dakota. So maybe 25 miles from the border is where the main focus of these sightings start in February of 1975. And it's I live in a big city about 35 miles northeast of where where the main focus of this thing happened. And it was in the newspaper, it was on TV and stuff, and it was a big story. And I said to my friend, we used to drive around the city and sort of just kill time. And I said, well, instead of driving around the big city, why don't we just go out and see what he's looking at? No interest in UFOs that I can remember, no interest in extraterrestrial phenomena, never even thought about the subject. I was interested in weird stuff. I was interested in Edgar Casey. I was interested in, had done a study at university on dying people in hospitals. So I'd gone and asked all the weird questions like, does anybody ever predict their death? Does anybody ever have someone come to visit them before they die? Anybody ever have near-death experiences? Because that's when near-death experiences first started in the mid-'70s. And so I was into that kind of weird stuff, but I really can't think about ever having thought about UFOs or anything like that. It was just I wanted to see what everybody was seeing. And it's like, well, let's go see what they're looking at.
Right.
And we didn't go. And then an event happened. And looking back on it now, that it didn't get published for 42 years, I look back on it and suddenly see that a lot of the events that happened back in 1975, I don't think were random. I think they actually happened. And at the time, I thought it was all random. I was in the wrong place or the right place at the right time, whatever you want to term it. And so what happened was there was a TV crew, and this is how I got involved. There was a bunch of TV stations who were running out to this town, and they were trying to film this thing as it was flying around. And the one crew got close to one night. They saw it, but they couldn't film it. So they go back to the TV station, and they say to the assistant news producer, they say, okay, we want to, we just about got it. We want to go out again. And the guy said, this is absolute nonsense. Nobody's going out. This is a total waste of time. I'm not paying any more overtime. You guys want to go, you can go on your own time. And so these guys were like, had sort of caught the bug. And so a couple of guys got together and they said, okay, we're going to go out. We're going to try to get this thing. And they had no cameraman. So they grabbed a guy who was a film editor out of the studio. And they grabbed this big TV camera, and out to the country they went, and this thing was on the ground. And they saw it on the ground. It was down what we call mile road. So in Manitoba, you have these what are called mile roads. There's a gravel road, and then north of it, there'll be a gravel road running north and south and east and west, these like checkerboard. Every mile there's a road. So they sent somebody on the north mile road, 1 mile north, and somebody on a mile road going south to try to surround this thing, to come in and figure out where it was down the road and then come across. And the car on the north side actually came across and then made the turn south. And suddenly there was the craft sitting there, and it was behind a row of trees. And there are no really trees because it's all farmland, wheat farms. And there's just this sort of a row of trees that they'd planted to stop snow on the field to get moisture. And this thing was behind these trees, and it was the way they described it was a 50-foot high saucer, tilted at a 45-degree angle like a drive-in movie screen, and it wasn't touching the ground; it was hovering on the air. And they were just like, "Wow!" It's like this thing was there, and so they go in there, getting their perspective of where they are in the countryside, looking at microwave towers because you're in the middle of nowhere. There's no real towns around where they were. And they're looking around to see so they could come back in the day and actually go to the ground and see if there was radiation counts, which there was. They went back the next day and they got these radiation counts on the ground where this thing had been hovering. And they look back and this thing is gone. And meanwhile, down at the other end of the road, the film editor guy is sitting there and he's watching this light in the viewfinder, and it gets brighter and it goes down, it gets brighter and it goes down. And he says, well, I got to get something on film. So the next time this thing brightens up, I'm going to shoot. And it was almost like the UFO said, are you ready to shoot? Because just as he pushed the camera, this thing jumped in the air. And it jumped in 3 frames. It jumped from the bottom of the frame to the top of the frame, and it was 8.25 miles away. So it jumps up, and in the second frame, it leaves what's called a flash frame. So the second frame, 1/24 of a frame of film, it lights up the entire horizon. And it leaves these big humps of light you can see in this frame of film. So anyway, they film this thing. They take it back. It becomes a viral film. They're running this 8-minute documentary. They're going frame by frame as they show this thing as it jumps up in the air, and then it's flying on a wave. It's not flying in a straight line. It's flying sort of in a wave pattern through the sky, and it becomes viral. NBC picks it up. J. Allen Hynek comes and gets 2 copies of this film. It becomes viral. And when I see that film, this is in May of 1975, 2 weeks after the end of the Vietnam War, I say to my friend, come on, let's go see, man. They got it on film. So as I always describe it, I buy the lottery ticket. knowing there's a chance I can win, but knowing I'm not going to win. I'm going to go out there. We're not going to see anything. Everybody else sees it. We're not going to see a thing. We go out there and we drive around the town, into the town. We're looking around at stars, planets, and stuff, and we're going like, what are they looking at? We had no idea. It's like, well, whatever they're looking at isn't very significant. My friend says to me, he says, okay, we'll drive back in town one more time. If we don't see anything, let's go home. I said, fantastic. This has been a total waste of time. We turn the car, we start back into town, and this thing appears from the left to the right. And it's this where I describe my first lesson in ufology is the whole, idea about knowing and believing. If you're not in the lab, if you did not see the experiment, if you were not there, you can either believe or disbelieve. That's all you can do. If you are there and you see it, you have a chance to know. And nobody said, is that what they're looking at? I wonder if that's what they're looking at. It's just instantly, everybody went, there it is. Everybody just instantly, this was the object because it was just so bizarre. It was not a light in the sky. It was an object. It was in fairly close. And at night, it was at nighttime. So in terms of actual, how far was it? How big was it? Hard to say, but it was an object. It was in fairly close. And it was down low, very close to the ground, 100 feet, maybe 150 feet in the air. It looked like it was alive. It was like a red plasma object, but it was pulsing very, very slowly. It had this very slow pulse to it, almost like it was a heart beating. And it was moving, and it was coming right in front of the car. It was flying right across the road in front of the car. And it was moving up and down, the same as this film had showed, that it wasn't actually flying in a straight line. It was almost like it was flying on a wave. And I just was so floored by this thing. I remember it was going behind a set of school buses, and the car was still actually moving a bit. And I was getting out of the car. I was going through this ditch. I wanted to run across this parking lot. And I remember standing at these school buses and just watching this thing just slowly pulsing as it just flew off into the northeast. And I'm going like, wow. I mean, my life was just changed. Dragged all my friends out there 2 nights later. I said, man, this will change your life. You got to see this. I was just like, going crazy. Drag all my friends out there. An hour later, they say, we're going back to Winnipeg. We're tired of this. We're hungry. We're going back. I said, no. You got to stay. You got to see this, man. It was, I'm trying to talk them into it. No. And I remember, we're going back to Winnipeg for pizza. I remember it was the last line. And off they went, all my friends. And there was about 28 people on this road because it was this small town and everybody from the big city was there trying to see things. Plus what you have in the country, like on Friday, Saturday night, you got all these kids, you get a case of beer, you go sit in some country road or whatever, and you sit there and drink beer. So there was all sorts of people on these back roads around this town. And we were on the one road there was 28 people there. And so by the time the thing actually came, there was only about 8 or 9 people left. There was our car, and then there was a second car. It was a courier car. And I remember we just saw the eclipse. We were in Oregon, and we saw the full eclipse. And it was the same sort of event. When I filmed the eclipse, I knew it was going to happen because I'd seen an eclipse before, and it was the same sort of event. Is instead of watching the eclipse, I watched the people, and I was filming, and I was watching how it got colder and darker and darker and darker. And then as it happens with the eclipse, it's suddenly people are cheering and screaming and applauding, and it's like, I mean, they're applauding the universe. It's like, people are just taken by this thing. And so I'm filming as I'm listening, as picking up all these people yelling and screaming in the dark. You can't see them. You can just hear them yelling and screaming. And that's the same thing happened this second night. So there's a flash on the horizon. It wasn't the same object as the first night to start. It was a flash on the horizon. And then I looked, and one of the kids, we had some kids doing science fair projects, and they're in the field. And the one kid yells back at me, "Is that it?" And this thing flashes again, and it's moving around in the sky. It's like jumping all over the place in the sky. It's just this flashing thing. And I said, well, I guess that's it. And the flashes kept going. And there was a girl in this car that was beside us, and she couldn't see it because it was moving around. And she's crying. I remember the people are yelling and screaming and swearing, and it was like just like the eclipse. And this girl is crying because she can't see this thing. Someone show me, I can't see it. And she's crying, and everybody's ignoring her and yelling. And I remember the guy, it was when motor drives came out on 35 millimeter cameras where it would automatically advance the film. And I can still remember the guy had the motor drive, and he had the camera on top of the car, and all I could hear was this click, zzz, click, zzz, click, zzz, and he was just unloading the camera as this thing was coming towards us. And it moved from this flashing object to this object I'd seen the first night, this sort of red object. And it was coming right at us. It was very, very low again, moving very, very slow. In fact, it was moving so slow that when it made the turn and started off into the north, these people in the other car jumped in the car, and the gravel was flying, and they were chasing it. And there was numerous times during this 75, 76 period where you could actually chase this thing. you could actually catch up on it. And I remember one time I sort of got the lesson about the fact the world is round, and learned that by the fact you have these mile roads that run straight north and south, except every 8 miles they move it 50 feet because the world is round. So you have to move it 50 feet over. So I'm driving along and I'm catching up on this thing, and I got these kids in the car and we're catching up on this thing, and I'm actually gaining on this UFO as it's very low to the ground, and all of a sudden the car's in the air, and I'm going, oh, and my first thought was, we're being abducted. And it was like, it's up in the air. And what happened was they had moved the road, and I actually drove right off the end of this road up, and the car was right up in the air. And luckily there was a pile of snow in the field, and we landed in the snow, so I didn't ruin the car. But that was how it sort of started, where we saw this thing. And then my impression was, well, why is nobody investigating this? Because the rumor was that, everybody was seeing this thing. So I thought, well, why is nobody talking to anybody? So I figured I was going to go around this town, and I was going to track down all the people. I had, this is they're going to get a Pulitzer Prize or something for this. I'm going to break this story. I couldn't believe that nobody was covering this thing. And I spent probably a year and a half, basically university. That was it for university. All I did was take courses that interested me after that. And I spent my time out there, and I interviewed all these people. I had piles of people on the list, and it was always the same story. It always started the same way. You'd go to someone and you'd say, I heard you saw something. And the first question is, who said I saw something? And I'd say, so-and-so said you saw something. And then the guy would go, it really wasn't anything. That's always the same way. It really wasn't anything. Oh, well, then just tell me. And then the guy would start telling you. And next thing you know, there's a saucer in the middle of the road, and his car is blocked, and it's some bizarre story, And then it would always end the same way. He'd say, I wasn't the only one that saw it, So-and-so saw it. This guy saw it. This guy saw it. This guy saw it. And they would give me this list. I had this list of names of people that everybody's ratting on everybody, but nobody wanted to go on the record because there was a couple of families that had actually gone on the record as to what was going on, and they were totally ostracized in this. It's a small town. It wasn't a religious town or anything, but it was a small town of about 2,000 people, so everybody knew who everybody was, and nobody really wanted to talk about it. And then when it was all said and done, I had a woman there, her husband owned the airport. She helped me put this manuscript together, and the National Enquirer was there, and it was a big deal. National Enquirer was going to call it UFO capital of the world, and we got all these stories together and tried to publish it, and nobody was really interested. And then the local publisher in my city, who should have published it because it was a big story, said, Mr. Cameron, you may believe in this kind of stuff. Count me among the unbelievers. And I went, were you kidding? I couldn't believe it. I was just like floored. And that's it. Forget it. Forget about sightings. All these are stories you can tell your kids when you grow old and gray, but this is just a total waste of time. You're not going to convince anybody with these stories. And I gave the manuscript to my sister, who is sort of like the family historian, and I gave it to her. And she held this thing for maybe 30 years, maybe longer than 30 years. And then she brought it back to me a number of years ago and said, oh, remember you gave me this? And I looked at it, and I went, whoa, I didn't realize I'd written the manuscript was finished. I thought I'd written a couple of chapters or something. And I thought, whoa. And it was when optical scanning software came in. So what I did is I optically scanned it into a digital copy, and then I let it sit again. And then I was actually talking to the woman tonight, and this may be back on the track again, but she wanted to do a story on the Rama. You're familiar with the Rama group from Peru?
Yeah.
Of experiencers? Yeah.
Okay.
So she wants to they want to do this movie on Rama. She's a TV producer in Toronto, big TV producer, and she had sort of gotten the bug, and so she wanted to do this movie, and nobody in Canada would finance the thing because it wasn't a Canadian thing. They couldn't care less about this, group of kids in Peru who are going for flying saucer rides and all this kind of stuff, and bringing in reporters and showing everybody was seeing this thing. And so she couldn't finance it. So then she heard about my manuscript, which happened at the same time. The Rama operation of these two brothers and all these kids who were having these sightings and interacting with aliens, and it was 1974. And the Rama group itself actually formed in 1975, the same year as mine. So what she decided to do is she said, well, can I read your manuscript? And I said, yeah, fine. So I gave her the manuscript, and she came back and said, oh, this is exactly what I'm looking for. So what they were going to do is they were going to tie this manuscript, my manuscript, together with the Rama thing. So it would have a Canadian angle to it. So it would be this reporter, the story would be, instead of me, it would be this reporter goes to Carmen, Manitoba with these sightings, and he's looking at all these sightings, interviewing all these people, and suddenly he discovers the Rama group in Peru. And he he goes to Peru, and that's where they would finance the story. So they optioned the thing for the movie, and she's actually going to send me the trailer in a couple of minutes, because now she's sort of interested, because this bizarre thing is actually reignited. And it gives you this idea about the fact that maybe things aren't as random as you think they are. Like, we make these false assumptions. We think it's a physical world when it's actually a conscious world, and we believe it's a random world when actually it's a world of patterns and learning and stuff like that. And so anyway, what happened was this film, and then she got sick. She got very sick, and she sort of put it on the shelf. Whatever, she said it was just a story she didn't want to really deal with anymore. And but she did the trailer and spent a fair bit of money on this thing. And then I was telling her, I said, I can't believe this actually happened. So it ties to this Rama group from 1975. So anyway, and they're from the planet Apu. So anyway, a couple of weeks ago, this is a month ago, you may have been, I don't know if you've ever been to the Mount Shasta world meditation thing where they go and meditate for world peace and stuff. So a friend of mine, Katerina, who I think you may know, Katerina Castillo from LA, has always helped me out in terms of editing and helping me with books and stuff like that. And she, I wasn't really that much into meditation. Well, not in meditation, but into world peace meditations and stuff. And she was into it. She said, "Oh, you got to come to this thing." And she'd always supported me. So I said, "Okay, Kat, I'll come to this meditation. I'll go along with it." And it's all in Spanish. Like, you can't even understand it. I mean, it's all these people from South America. It's like bizarre. They're coming to save the United States of America. You know, we messed up the world, and then they're going to come here and pray and meditate for world peace. Like, there's almost nobody from the United States. They're from all over the 12 countries or something. They come from Spain, a whole bunch of them from Spain, and they come here and they're all meditating to clean up the mess that we made. And anyway, so I go to this thing, and I don't know if you are familiar with Paula Harris's story of the beings, 2014, 2015. Yes. Michael Salla has the first one. 2013 is Michael Salla. Then 2014, Paula is pulled. There's 6 people pulled, and they go through this Zendra, and they walk through the Zendra, and this 9-foot-tall being by the name of Antarel is in the forest. So I known this story because Paula told me the story, and I said, "Paula, you got to go public with this. I mean, you're a public person. People need to know that you saw this thing." So that happened in 2014, and in 2015, she's in the forest again at this event. It happens once a year. The beings land again, and they're in the forest, and this time they're more like holograms. You can see through them, and there's these little beings playing sort of hide and go seek in the trees. It's just bizarre, and there's 9 witnesses. So I go to this event, and here's what happens. So when Michael Salla had his event there in 2013, they get a message, and so the guy that runs it, his name is Ricardo Gonzalez. He's originally from Peru, now lives in Argentina. And he's a contactee since he was a young kid, whatever. And he's had a number of these interactions with this being by the name of Antarel and this female being, whose name escapes me. But anyway, so when Salla he got the message from Antarel that they would appear for Michael Salla, and Michael Salla was to report to the world. So Michael Salla goes there. In fact, I'm interviewing Michael about his experience on Tuesday. But Michael goes there. They have this flyby or whatever. They called it a planned encounter or a planned event or something. And so he reports on what happened to him and the fact that this thing appeared at the right time and all this sort of stuff. And same with Paula. Paula gets this in 2014. She gets a message to go to Shasta. Antarel says they're going to appear. They want her to come to Shasta, and she goes. And then 2016, she said, "I'm not going. I'm running my conference. I'm not going." And there's this bizarre incident in Boulder where her phone rings at 7 o'clock. She's in the swimming pool. Her phone rings, and it's this Tom guy who phones her. So she picks up the phone, and by then it's hung up. So she phones Tom, and she said, "You phoned me." And he said, "No, I didn't. You phoned me. In fact, I watched the phone as it dialed you." And it was like this whole thing with this bizarre thing. So she says, "Well, I got to go." There's this message that Antarel is saying you got to come. So she gets called to the forest again, and this time there's like the 9 witnesses who are watching this event inside this Zendra in the forest. And 2016, nothing happens except there's a bizarre story that I get when I'm there, but I'll skip that story. And then 2017, so I'm going. And all I'm doing is I'm supporting Katerina because she's into this thing and she's into the world peace and meditation and stuff. Okay, Kat, we're going to go to this thing. So I got this girl with me. We're driving across the Nevada desert. This is, when is it? August 15th. We're driving across, and this girl's phone rings. And it's Katerina. And Katerina says, I got a message for Grant. It comes from Paula. It's a message from Aunt Terrell to Ricardo, to Paula. And Paula's supposed to tell me, and Paula hands the message off to Katerina to tell me that Aunt Terrell knows I'm coming to the mountain, and that they're going to do a planned encounter, or the planned event, or whatever they call it. I can't remember. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness. I mean, I had no intention, because these other girls were really into this thing. I thought, like, why couldn't they have somebody else that, I don't want to be the focus of this thing or whatever. But so I get this message from an alien. This is the second time I've got a message from an alien. I can tell you the other one was from Chris Bledsoe, but this is the second time I got a message from an alien. So I go, okay, I really don't want to do this, but it may be a soul agreement or whatever. So let's make the best out of it. And so I do the whole, the fasting and all that sort of stuff as we're a couple days away, and figure, okay, we'll do the best we can with this thing, and we'll see what happens. During that day, the planned event is on the Saturday night. And so during that day, I get Paula, and we're near the field where this happened, in these bushes. And I said, Paula, can you tell me the story? And then so she starts walking into the field. And I get this whole thing on camera, like 25 minutes of her standing in this clearing where she's standing at the tree. It's like minute by minute, blow by blow, as she describes, this person standing here, and this is here, and this guy's chanting in the background. And it was just like riveting. And I'm going like, wow, I got this on camera, this whole story of Paula's 2 encounters in the forest with these beings. And then she introduces me to these other people. Oh, this person was there. And then I said, you were there? Yeah, I was there. And then I said, can I film you? And then we start filming. I'm starting to film all these people, and they're all telling this story about being in this Zendra with this alien. I'm thinking, wow, this is cool. I'm all excited, and now we got this planned event that night. And I figured, like, oh man, if we get to go to the forest, and I'm thinking, this is where I got dragged back in. I go like, I know there's a 2012 encounter, Sala in 2013, Paula 14, 15, 16 is this woman that has this really bizarre event, and now we got 2017. I should just record all these events and make this short book, because everybody knows maybe one of the stories, but nobody knows that every year you have these bizarre events at Mount Shasta. And so then what happens is there's a PhD psychologist from Venezuela there. And I see her during the day, and she's got a message from Paula. She's channeled Aunt Terrell. Now, apparently, I don't know if it's in that message or it was later in the day, she actually got another message. We will be appearing at 9:33. So, and then Ricardo got the same message, 9:33. So we're sitting there and freezing to death. Like, I live in the coldest major city in the world, and I'm going to, everybody's sitting beside me. I'm going like, this is cold, because you're not moving. You're just sitting there, and they're doing this meditation and oming, and this goes on for hours, and you're preparing or whatever you're doing to bring this thing in or whatever. And they said between 9 and 10. And I'm closely watching Ricardo, how he's reacting, and he's getting up and he's walking around, he's looking at the sky, and I'm watching him very closely. And then I didn't realize it was 9:33. Time had been given twice. So 9:33, suddenly everything breaks loose, and it's the weirdest thing, because I look up. They're beaming. They're shooting the lasers up above me. So I look up above me, and it was the weirdest feeling. It was like I look up, and there's this giant flash in the sky. And I'm going, this is not going to be good. This is right above me. That's my first impression. I said, this is going to sound like a real ego trip when I report that this thing was right above my head. And I'm thinking, it can't be above my head. It's got to be above the group. And then I'm looking, no, it looks like it's right above me. And everybody in that reported said it was above my head. And yet it was very high up, and it was this flashing. So there was people there, because you don't know the events happening. So when it starts to happen, nobody's really recording the time. Nobody's recording how many flashes. So now I'm trying to gather this. How many flashes was there? I only saw about 3 or 4, and I missed the big one. There was a giant cheer went up when the big flash took place, and it didn't move. Now people are, of course, jumping on this thing and saying it's a satellite, and it's a geocentric satellite, and you're seeing these flashes and stuff like that. And when it all was over, I thought to myself, well, it's kind of cool, but it's not exactly what I expected. And in the middle of the night, I woke up with this sort of a download thing, and the thing that came into my head, and they were all upset, like, don't say this, it's going to upset everybody. And I go, the first thing that came into my head is like, because the message that they have, this Antarel's message, is that we have basically messed it up. It's basically almost over. And the old idea that, they've destroyed their planet and they're warning us, and we've got less than 100 years to go. And the download I got in the middle of the night was like, they appear for Paul in 2015. So then it's a whole year. 2016, they don't appear. And then there's another year, 2017, they do these couple of flashes. And then we got another year, September the 8th is the next one next year. And I'm thinking, in 3 years, the world is coming to an end. In 3 years, that's the best you could do, is a couple of flashes? Come on. I mean, like, you got to do better than that. That was the download I got. And everybody's saying, no, don't say that. And I'm going to report what I experienced. But the weird thing was that Apu, the being, this Antarel, is from Apu. And Apu is Rama. That's the planet that all the Rama people were dealing with. And so you have this bizarre story of this my book getting published. And it was actually the producer, the one that was doing the Rama story, that actually got the book published. I had no interest in it. If it had been up for me, this book would never have been published, because I'm really not into selling books or anything like that. I like to research and write stuff down, but I had this book for 40 years and never published it. And she wanted it published because she was going to do the movie, and she wanted the book out. So she went and negotiated with Dundurn, who actually published the book. And then I saw the contract, and it basically said that they got every book I would write in the future, they would have it at this crazy rate that they pay you. And I'm going, no, I'm not in this for money. You're not going to control my next book. And I refused to sign the contract. So I just let it lapse. And then this producer came back to me again after a year. I let it lapse or whatever. And she said, well, what happened? I said, well, I'm not going to sign that contract. And she said, well, you can negotiate with them, And I said, well, that's not my style. I don't want to fight with people or negotiate or whatever. And it's like, and so she went and negotiated again. And it was actually her who got the book published the second time. And then I figured I better play nice. I better not, shaft her for the second time, because she embarrassed her the first time when I backed out. So I said, okay, I'll play nice, and I allowed the book to be published. And I went along with all the stuff they wanted to do, cut these chapters out and do all this kind of stuff. And now, and her original reason was because she was going to do this Rama movie. And now suddenly I'm in Shasta, and I'm dealing with this alien from the same planet as Rama. And then I find out that there's a group across the road, that there's a second meditation group, another contactee who's there, and he's got a group of 50. Ours had 130. There was a second group, and they're meditating, and they're on the other side of the road. And there's this division. Like, we're not going there. So like, they're the bad guys for the good guys, that kind of separation nonsense, whatever. But so they're there, and I see them. And then later, because we had these flashes and we had a couple other things that flew by. So I went to the guy his name is Enrique. And I went to this Enrique guy, and I said, what happened on your side of the road? And he sends me this 32-minute tape of all these encounters they had, and they had this stuff on film. And it looks like they got the flashes on film, and they had this other object that we saw. They got that on film, and he's actually trained by Rama. He's an experiencer since the 1970s, and he worked with Rama during the 1980s. So you see this full circle. So suddenly I'm in this Rama story that started years ago with this woman that wanted to publish the book. And then suddenly I run into Rama, and I'm going like, what's the chances that now I'm in the middle of this Rama story? And it had been part of the whole idea for why the book was actually published. So the book in the 70s would have been pretty dull if it had been published. Now we added the nuclear weapons connection, and this whole Rama thing is almost like a whole new book where I'm going to sort of tell the story about how I got dragged into this thing, almost like it was intended that I get into tell this Rama story of these beings that are in the bush at Mount Shasta.
Well, your reticence to publish it, or your lack of enthusiasm from the beginning is part of this whole thing of pluralistic ignorance that most people in our world understand there's probably an alien presence, and that there's certainly been sightings that ordinary people know everybody else has seen, and the government is lying. But no one comes out and says that because they fear sanctions like ridicule or worse. But it's what happens, as Schachter's shown, with pluralistic ignorance, is when the public figures start breaking the taboo against privacy and hiding, that other people can too. And I think that you're shattering the veil.
Yeah. Yeah, it has. I mean, it has done a service in terms of, I know that the fact that, you know, it's all sort of like lifting the vibration that you. It's almost like the idea with, you know, with gay rights or you know, African American rights or whatever. It's like, well, when did the gays actually get sort of treated a little bit human? And you're going, well, I don't know when it was 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and it's sort of like it just sort of happens. It's like, and so that's the part we've got to do, is sort of to get the thing out there, and eventually it will work itself out. It's almost like I sometimes think that the intelligence behind the phenomena has done this probably on many planets before. They know exactly what to do next and how to raise the consciousness and stuff. And they're doing this sort of like little bits and pieces and triggering this person and triggering that person. Because when I point out, because I've been in it so long, that I point out to people that people think it's always the same. What happened now happened then. No, it's a completely different world. It's like 1890s. They're, you know, wooden ships with propellers, and then you have Foo Fighters, then you have the green fireballs, then you have the Adamski crafts with the balls under them, and then you have flying saucers with windows, and then you have flying saucers without windows, and then you have the plasma objects, and then you have triangles, and it's just like a cycle where they're almost like they're turning the pages of a book and dragging us through this sort of process.
You know, but it keeps going between apocalyptic and utopian. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And that's the part that sort of drags me down, is this sort of this fight where, you know, it's sort of I like to sort of report the stuff and then just sort of put it out there and just sort of disappear. It's just becomes so viral, especially when you're on Facebook or something, where there's people who their mission in life is to counter everything that you put up, and that's the kind of stuff that sort of to me, it's like you put it out and then look the other way and go on to the next project and let it work out. So to me, it's
I wanted to go back. We started, and you said this started in February of '75.
Yeah.
So in 1975, I turned 21 at the largest Star Trek conference, I guess, to date. There were like 20,000 people in New York City. Wow. And that's where they announced that the movie was coming back. It was, I was born February 6th, so it was that weekend, February 6th of 75. And so then you said this Charlie Red Star started, and so 75 was when the Vietnam War ended. And then you said that there's something associated with the nuclear testing or something, and that was a connection. And then
yeah, 75 was a big year for a lot of weird things. For example, 75 was Travis Walton, and I always see Travis Walton's story completely different than anyone else. Everybody, you know, people see it as you know, the evil aliens, or Travis sees it as, you know, he's in the wrong place at the wrong time and he got zapped, and you know, he may have died, and it took him 5 days to bring him back or whatever. And to me, it's messaging. To me, the way I see UFOs now is it's all messaging. Everything's messaging. That's all they're doing is messaging. And the message in the Travis Walton thing was, let's keep him for 5 days, and this will really open it up. I mean, this will really make people think. And so they kept him for 5 days, and it's still the biggest abduction story. Everybody knows who Travis Walton is. He lectures almost every week around the world. And if they'd taken him for 2 hours, you never would have heard Travis Walton. But because they kept him for 5 days, and that's where I think, like with cattle mutilation and stuff like that, like, why do they drop the cow in the middle of, so everybody can see it? Because they know Linda Howe and a bunch of people are going to take pictures and they're going to put it all over the internet, and some guy in the government is going to go, did you see where that cow was? Did you see that? Because the way I look at it, the connection with the nuclears is, there's now the guy David Perkins. I don't know if you've interviewed him, but David Perkins has maybe the best collection of cattle mutilation data. And he says his contention now is that all cattle mutilations happen downwind and downstream from nuclear power activities. And he actually talks about a 1997 study that was done by the National Cancer Institute, where they looked at the cancer rates downwind from nuclear above-ground testing east of the Rockies. And he said, and this is his words, not mine, he said that when you take the hotspot chart produced by the National Cancer Institute and you put it over top of the cattle mutilation map, it's a direct match. So it's that kind of thing where in 75 you see along the Canadian-U.S. border, you see all the NORAD, all the, there was NORAD documents, but you see all the Strategic Air Command bases, SAC bases, Loring Air Force Base, Wilbert Smith Air Force Base on the Michigan border, Minot Air Force Base, which is just on the North Dakota, just into North Dakota here, Malmstrom Air Force Base. They were all visited by UFOs in 1975, and the UFOs were inside the weapon storage areas where they kept the nuclear weapons. The same as Rendlesham Forest, where the rumored story was that they shot the beam down into the nuclear weapons storage area, and this is where they kept all the tactical nuclear weapons that would have been used at the Polish border. And when Rendlesham Forest happened, the Russians had moved their troops to the Russian border, to the Polish border, because Lech Walesa had taken over there, and they were going to separate, and they were going to reinvade the country. And the Americans said, "Don't dare try to go in there." And then suddenly these UFOs appear over the tactical nuclear weapons in Europe that they were going to be used at the border. So you see these connections, and everything starts to make sense. Like if I published the book in the 70s, that wouldn't have come out, because in 75. The sightings started in February. You were at the conference in the Star Trek conference, and in February of 1975, in a town called Nakoma, North Dakota, they started to install the only anti-ballistic missile unit that ever went operational in the United States, and it's cost them $6 billion in 1975 funds. And what it was pre-Star Wars. And Reagan came out. He tried to build all this stuff in outer space, but in 1975, it was built in Nakoma, North Dakota, just south of the border, just south of where all these UFOs were being seen. And what it was they had North Dakota, if it had been a country, would have been a nuclear superpower, because it had 300 Minuteman nuclear missiles with 3 warheads on each of them. And we all knew in Canada that if there was ever a nuclear exchange, we were the first to go, because every 10th Russian missile is going to land shorter on top of us. And so we knew these missiles were there. And people don't realize that the number one target of the Russians' missiles is not Washington, New York, Los Angeles. It's the missiles in North Dakota, South Dakota, Wisconsin, Montana, because unless you take out those missiles, you're not going to see what happens in Washington. You're gone. So you have to take out those missiles first. And so what they were doing is they put up this site with 100 new nuclear missiles in order to try to shoot down the Russian incoming ICBMs to protect the missiles in North Dakota. And they started putting them in February when your big conference took place, when I had the sightings start. That's when they put the missiles in, and they negotiated with the Russians in 75 in November to stop this. And they started taking them out at the end of 75, and that's when the UFOs went away. And I had the guy who ran the airport in Carmen, I asked him, I said, "Bob, how many sightings do you have in 1975? And he said, about 150, 75, 76. And I said, "How many sightings have you had since?" He said, "None." And it was like they took the drugs out of the water. It was there and it was gone, and it really has not come back. And that's where, to me, if I'd written the book in the 70s, you never had the nuclear weapons connection. And it's not 100% that was what it was. But what I also thought in 75 is the idea that the beings behind, the intelligence behind this phenomena is telepathic. So they know what we're doing, even though you and I don't know what's going on. But in 1975, you remember back in those days, it was the idea of the domino theory, that the communism would take over the world. It was the dominoes, and the countries would fall like one after another like dominoes until eventually communism would rule the world. That was the big political fear in the West, was the domino theory. And so America had lost Cambodia, Laos, South Vietnam, and they had pulled all the troops out. So they had no troops in Southeast Asia. And then they're sitting there in 1975. My sighting takes place 2 weeks after the end of the Vietnam War. And you got to think, what are the American officials thinking? They're thinking, which country's going next? What are the Russians going to do? They're going to take South Korea. They're going after the Philippines. They're going after Indonesia. What are they going to do next? And you start thinking, what are we going to do if they try to take Philippines? What are we going to do? Well, you got no troops in Southeast Asia, so what are you going to do? And they start thinking, maybe we'll have to use the nukes. We are going to have to use a nuclear attack to stop them from progressing to another country, because we don't have any troops on the ground. And maybe it was. That's why all the SAC bases were visited. That's why we had these sightings. And there was lots of sightings in Wisconsin. There was lots of sightings in Minnesota as well, which we pulled out of the book. They wanted they wanted the book cut down, so I cut all that stuff out of there. But there were sightings down there as well, and so you had this idea that maybe like the cattle mutilation thing, where people in Washington know what's going on, and we just sort of think everything's random, and they know exactly what's going on. They know exactly why the UFOs are inside the nuclear weapons storage area. They know exactly why the cattle mutilations are occurring, but you can't talk about it because you don't want to make the connection with nuclear weapons and UFOs. And so they keep very quiet about it, and we all just assume that it's random, or it's evil aliens, or it's something like that.
What was this? So they were talking about the planet Rama. In '74, the Locus Award went to Arthur C. Clarke's Rendezvous with Rama. Are they people talk about the same Rama that Clarke described in his book? Is that where that came from?
I'll have to look. It's the first time I heard about that. The Rama was the story about Sixto and Charles Paz, who were these kids in the Peru desert who had this UFO, and then they saw it again, and then it landed, and the door opens up, and they had this encounter with this alien, and then they brought their parents to see this thing. They brought their friends, and they brought their friends in, and their friends saw it. Then they brought their parents, and their parents saw it, and then they had this big challenge where some reporter from Spain is there, and he challenges them to produce the fact that this is for real, that they're doing this, and they bring this reporter out there, and this thing appears, and this reporter writes this big story or a book. I can't remember how to, because I'm just sort of now reinvestigating this thing, because I ignored the story. I knew this story had happened, and they've become very famous. They trained people during the 1980s. They separated in 1991. It's become an ugly story. The brothers separated, and they're fighting. It's a real sort of got to be an ugly story about who controls this group. And so in 1991 it sort of disbanded, but a lot of the people who were trained are still around, and it's sort of like a CE5 thing. But it's the South American version of CE5. And a lot of them claim that they've got these encounters, like the guy that's running the Shasta event that I went to. Ricardo has over a dozen encounters, and he's written a book about his encounters. He's had 2 physical encounters on board the ship, and then he's had these others where he has, at Mount Shasta. But there's a lot of these South American, it's almost like here we're into the gray aliens and the abduction stuff. But in South America, you have all these people, almost like the 1950s in the United States. These people who are claiming to have, friendly encounters with these aliens and going for rides on the flying saucers and stuff like that. And there's a lot of these people running around. In fact, at Shasta, there was Ricardo on the one side of the road, and this Enrique guy on the other side of the road, running 2 separate groups with these huge numbers of people who are, and they're training them how to come in contact, like their version of CE5, how to make contact, and having these planned encounters where the aliens are saying, okay, bring in this researcher, bring in Grant Cameron, we're going to fly by for him, and then he's to report to the world. And so it's kind of a bizarre thing that I was really never into, although I was in, like when I published the Canadian book, when the book wasn't published, that's when I said, forget the sightings, this is a waste of time. And all I said was in 1975 or 77, when I tried to publish the book, because I couldn't publish it, I said, well, all I'm interested in is what did I see? Because I had 5 close encounters. I was up close. Nobody's going to tell me what I saw. I was up close, but I still really didn't know. Somebody, I figured, had to know what I saw. And that's when I went to the Canadian government. And it was another one of these events where now I look back and it's like, no, this wasn't random. My father was a pilot for the Canadian government. He flew for the Department of Transport. And he was kind of skeptical. He would, he'd listen to my stories and stuff. And he had his own sighting and stuff. But he had a guy in his office who had a sighting in the area. And it was just a simple sighting, late in the sky, whatever. And he said, Ernie had a sighting. He wants to talk to you. So, okay. I go visit this Ernie guy. He's a radar technician. And this Ernie guy says to me, tells me a sighting and whatever, it's in this area at this time. And then he says, if you really want to know what's going on with UFOs, he's like answering the question that I'm saying. Like, somebody must know what's going on. He said, if you really want to know what's going on with UFOs, you should study what the Canadian government was doing in the 1950s. He said, I worked for the guy. I said, you did? And it was like, there was only about 6 people worked for this guy in the UFO or the flying saucer program. And this was one of the guys. Like, what's the chances that one of the guys was in my father's office? And so then that's when I chased the Canadian government. I went after Wilbert Smith. And Wilbert Smith was a contactee, the same as these South Americans now. Like all these South Americans, they're all these contactee guys, same as Wilbert Smith. So I have nothing against contactees, because I knew Wilbert Smith was a contactee, and he had this alien by the name of Alpha, and they were going to land him at a base in Canada, and I knew all the stories about, you know, the interaction and how, you know, they taught the CIA to bring this, and they brought this alien in, they channeled this alien and stuff like that. So I knew the contactee thing. But it set me on this path of going after the president, the vice president, and CIA, and all these people to find out what the answer to the whole story was. And now I'm back to the contactees again, except I'm in South America now.
Well, we're coming up on the first break, but I would like the second half will go into the contactee stuff more. I have someone that said that you're helping them with a book, and so I know you're doing some good work helping the contactees to get their stories out there, and I'm a contactee, and so that's very important information to tie it into. What were you going to say, honey? No, nothing. Okay. What was I going to say? Anyway, it's coming soon. But I was looking at the cover of your book, and back in the late 60s, early 70s, I would see the plasma balls, big balls, in Pittsburgh, and mine were kind of the red. It was orange and yellow, and there was even a green, or they were different colors. And so you said that the sightings kind of go in phases. You see different things at different times. Is that what you were saying earlier? Yeah,
over history. Yeah, I say if you look back on the history of ufology, people assume that everything's the same. For example, in the book, in the Charlie Red Star book, I have a whole chapter on landings, where they land, they burn out the grass, or they burn out the plants in the field, and they leave these tripod marks. Well, that hasn't happened for 20 years. That doesn't happen anymore. It's almost like they've changed it. Now they're doing the experiencer thing, giving messages to people and stuff. And even the one I have a story in the book where the guy has the little alien walking around with the staff. Well, that doesn't happen anymore either.
Okay, hold that thought. We'll be back in about 5 minutes for a break. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Who are you? I am the architect. I created the Matrix. I've been waiting for you.
Why am I here?
You are the eventuality of an anomaly which, despite my sincerest efforts, I have been unable to eliminate from what is otherwise a harmony of mathematical precision, which has led you inexorably here.
You haven't answered my question.
The Matrix is older than you know. As you are undoubtedly gathering, the anomaly is systemic, creating fluctuations in even the most simplistic equation.
Choice. The problem is choice.
Right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. Be here Wednesday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern Time for Private Eye Matrix Revealed with Monique Lassonde.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? I've just been handed an urgent news story, and I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
Hey folks, you got the Nighthawk here. Do you have a favorite host? Well, imagine if you will having all the broadcast shows from 2013 to listen to anytime you want. Awesome deal, huh? Anyway, so stop by freedomslips.com and order the entire 2013 library of your favorite host for just $30. Not only do you help with the station funding to keep us on the air, you also help the host because they get half of the net on every order. Also, we have Revolution Radio's all-time favorite shows all on one disc. The details are really broad, so you'll have to visit the website and go look at the details yourself. It's, again, www.freedomslips.com/season2013.htm. And get your favorites. First come, first serve, 7 to 21 days for delivery. Thank you. This is Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps, including me. Later.
We gotta stop them! They're gonna kill us all!
Most guys freeze. That's your cerebral cortex looking for an answer it doesn't have.
See? Even your brain knows you're screwed.
The body's filling with adrenaline right now, whether you know it or not. Your heart's beating fast. It's getting a little harder to breathe. The neurobiological system is telling it to run, but your knees are too weak to move.
Fear is not real. The only place that fear can exist is in our thoughts of the future. It is a product of our imagination, causing us to fear things that do not at present and may not ever exist. That is near insanity. Do not misunderstand me. Danger is very real, but fear is a choice. We are all telling ourselves a story.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. 100% listener-supported radio. Reporting to danger. Unafraid. Right here, where information never sleeps. Revolution Radio.
For the politically aware.
Welcome to Sacred Matrix, a divine paradigm of love and universal consciousness, with your host, Janet Kira Lesson and Dr. Sasha Lesson.
Together we transform the world.
And now, here are your hosts, Janet Kira and Dr. Sasha Lesson.
Hi, Grant. It's
How you
Janet
doing?
and
Yeah, super. I don't know why my thing isn't picking up here. But anyway.
Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can.
Super. That's what we need.
Good. Well, we managed to get on the air despite the hurricanes. So I know Thomas Becker is right down there, the tip of Florida.
Oh, my goodness.
And hopefully, but they won't reach you for
I'm at the
day.
top. It ain't going to really hit me until tomorrow.
Tomorrow. Yeah. So
okay. Do the show and then run.
Yeah, do the show and then run for the hills.
Well, this is one of the times I know that most of us taking our psychic power tests zapped clouds. We sat in our back porches and said, let's get that cloud over there. So, and that's in a way how thought can truly zap particular clouds. We have a friend who's making the storm go around her house. I'm very curious to see if it's going to work.
Yeah, let's see if it works. I hope it does. Yeah. Oh, if it's gone away around friend A's house, it means going to somebody else's house. So that's Need to get it completely back out into space or something. Anyway, we're here today, and the power is still on in the East Coast. So it's out in some parts, but it's still out.
Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps and freedom is one seed that needs to be planted.
What we do in life, it goes in eternity.
Welcome back to the Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com with myself, Janet Kerr Lesson, and Dr. Sasha Alex Lesson, and our very special guest, Grant Cameron, and our producer, Thomas Becker, also known as a Mad Painter. But before we return to our show, I'd like to remind everybody to please go over to that donation button on freedomslip.com, freedomslips.com.
It's Freedom's Lips.
Freedomslips.com. And make your donation of 5, 10, 15, 20, whatever, 100, 500. And we greatly appreciate your donation. Mad Painter, where are we?
We have we have 1390. We need 2575. Plus, we got an equipment upgrade of $600, so we need quite a bit.
All right.
Hawk turned around and paid for the equipment out of his own pocket, and then we got to turn around and pay him back because he got a heck of a deal if he went ahead and got it. So please donate.
Okay. Please,
equipment
please
update will go in the next week. We'll all have new servers at the studio.
Wonderful.
Great. Oh, thank you, Hawk.
Yes, thank you. So, did you want to say anything before we bring back Grant?
Well, I've been really looking at this thing about evidence and looking at the Bashago Dolan debate, where I think that Andy Bashago quite won on the basis of saying that evidence that's witnesses that you can cross-examine has value that may even be greater than things that were written down. So that's the same thing that when we look at what is it that doesn't count, and what happens in the official government, in the press, the government concern has is that what doesn't count is eyewitnesses and people that are witnessing the witnesses, and it's so utterly overwhelming so what this comes down to, what's really being covered up. And I think what's one of the big bases is that really has both kinds of evidence is, did Eisenhower and maybe Truman and Roosevelt before them actually say to aliens, you have our government's acquisition and you kidnapping and murdering and using, taking away people's lives and rights? And I think there's a documentary evidence and a lot of whistleblowers, too. And I just wonder if you have any take on that, Grant.
Right. I just wanted to say, Grant, we've been interviewing a lot of whistleblowers, secret space program people that are coming forth. And there's a really dark side of this whole story. Not everybody gets to be the superheroes on the other side. Some of them, they take out the trash and they spend a lifetime in servitude. And then you have on the other end a lot of experiencers, and they're having these wonderful, high, spiritual, positive experiences. And as a researcher, investigator, and author, I'm looking at this, and my mind is totally blown. And I just wonder, what are you discovering the more you investigate this field and all these different eyewitnesses?
I don't deal with the single whistleblowers. Except Andy. I know Andy, and I know his story, and I have... let's see, I talked to him about it. I had some evidence that sort of backed up his story that I had been given by somebody in Nassau in terms of the building he was in. But otherwise, the single whistleblower stories, I've got enough trouble already. What I did when I wrote the book Managing Magic is I deal with the multiple whistleblower stories where you get situations like Stephen Greer, 540 witnesses, Bill Moore, 24 witnesses, Tom DeLong, 10 witnesses, where people are coming, where you can sort of verify who these people are coming to somebody and leaking material. So people know I spent a lot of time chasing Ron Pandolfi around. And Ron is, he's dealt with 24 people that I know of directly. In terms of giving material, he's sort of like the liaison. he's sort of helping people do this kind of stuff. And I talk about these meetings that they have right on the internet. They go to meetings where they're trying to get across this idea of portals. So that's the kind of stuff that I'm sort of chasing. Not that the other stuff is not real. It's just that I only have so much time, and that was the route that sort of I got dragged down that rabbit hole of, running into, like, I worked with Bill Moore in the 1980s. I had Kit Green from the CIA go and investigate one of my witnesses, or go talk to one of the main witnesses where they tried to help me out. And the people that I've interacted with, high-level government people, have always been people, just my personal opinion, I've never really met anybody other than that. It's people who are just the same as you and I. They have a lot of hang-ups and weird things about them or whatever, but they're basically just sort of doing a job. That was my impression. So I spent a lot of time on the multiple whistleblowers, and in the end, it's all going to shake out whenever it comes. And I'd say that whatever it is, it all still, even if stuff isn't true, it still raises consciousness. You can go back to the African American thing and say, because people wrote bad articles about African Americans, did that stop them from getting some civil rights? No, it didn't. The more you talk about it, whether the story is right or wrong, it's almost a thing where, as long as they spell your name right. And I think all the discussion, the more we discuss it, even if we're arguing about it, the more consciousness is raised, because in the end, everybody's going to look inside themselves and realize, yeah, this is probably true. I mean, they may, on the outside, you have 5 or 6 skeptics making a big case, but in the end, nobody believes them. That people will come to the right conclusion when it comes right down to it, whether it's gay rights or African American rights or the women's right to vote or whatever. Eventually, everybody comes to decide and make the right decision.
I think one of the interesting things is that Richard Dole and others have said is how much money on disinformation and on confusing the public and hurting the publicity opportunities for people that are whistleblowing or have serious evidence to discuss. How much money is spent on that by the agencies in the military, and it's huge. It's a huge amount, and that indicates it's probably true, or they wouldn't try to deny whatever they're denying.
Yeah, and yet it's still, when I'm pointing out magic is, people, I disagree with people who say like it's an absolute cover-up, because if it was an absolute cover-up, you would just shut up. That's what every nation in the world except the United States has done. If I say to you, what's going on in Canada? What are the Canadian government doing? Nobody has any idea. I don't know. I've been here 42 years, and except for those first 4 years that the Canadians were running Project Magnet, I have no idea, except Paul Heller told a story last year about, a high-level official on his deathbed tells him this story. Other than that, we don't know anything. And what's Belgium doing? What's Australia doing? Nobody knows anything because they just shut up. They don't talk about it. It's the Americans. It's like, so I say they're not covering up, because if they wouldn't be leaking this material, they wouldn't be dropping this material into the UFO community if there was nothing to it. They would just shut up and the story would go away. It's almost like the original story that happened is in 1969, you shut down Blue Book. So you at that point, you could have said, that's it. There's nothing to it. We're not going to talk about it. We're not going to have any news conferences or whatever. And you would never, ever have to have talked about the story again. And in 1972, my friend, Bob Emenegger, is approached by the Defense Department, and he works for Gray Advertising, which is a front company for CIA. He didn't know that, but that's where they put their stuff through Gray Advertising. And he's an executive for Gray Advertising. And they come to him and they say to him, we want you to do these 8 documentaries on the government, on working with 3D holography and dolphins and all these things to make the military look better, because it's the Vietnam War and we're in bad light and stuff. And then, yeah, fine, we're going to do that. And then they say, oh, yeah, we'd like you to do this 9th documentary on UFOs, and we'd like you to hide it under the other documentaries. And he goes, what do you mean? What are you talking about? UFOs? And it's like, this stuff's for real? Because he was total disbeliever, and he was shocked. And so the question is, if you have it shut down, if you have Blue Book shut down, and you never have to talk about UFOs again, why would you go out in 1973 and hire Gray Advertising to do a documentary where you tell the story of the channeling the alien Alpha in CIA headquarters, which is a true story. Why would you put that story out? Why would you leak this kind of stuff? So I say they're not covering up because they would shut up and just not talk about it, and the story would go away.
Yeah.
And they're not disclosing, because if they wanted to disclose, to get the New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, and Fox News, and they'd show them the bodies and the crafts and have a news conference, and it would all be over. They're doing something in between. So they're doing this sort of gradual thing where they're using disinformation to cover the whole story, so nobody really knows what's going on. So you leak MJ12. And give you an example, and I've never brought this one up before. This is a prime example of something that people will have to explain to me, because I've written about MJ12 and people say, oh, it's a total hoax. I say, okay, explain this. It's released in 1987. So people say, oh, it's disinformation to throw us off, to kill the UFO field or whatever. So you have the thing is leaked in 1984. Bill Moore, Stanton Friedman, Jamie Chandray work on this document for 3 years. Then their hand is forced. The intelligence says it's about to be released in Great Britain. If you want credit for this document, you better release it now. And they're forced to go public with it. So they go to the MUFON conference, 1987, and they make this document public before they're really ready to make this document public. It suddenly gets identified. Someone says it's a hoax. Everybody runs for the hills. Bill Moore created this thing. It's all a big hoax, whatever. But one of the things that people don't realize is that Ron Pandolfi, the head guy for the CIA, the guy that runs the Weird Desk and the Paranormal Phenomena, the guy that shut down the remote viewing program, the head guy actually, hours after that document is released in Washington, D.C., contacts Bruce Maccabee. And he says, Bruce, I'd like you to give a lecture at CIA headquarters. And he goes into CIA headquarters and he gives a lecture on the MJ12 document and on the CIA's FOIA thing with 1,000 documents. And according to Ron Pandolfi, there were all these agents running around looking in files for UFO stuff, and he just created this great havoc. So the question is, if you're going to disinform people, and that's what the MJ12 document is, why would you take Bruce Maccabee within hours of releasing that document and go into CIA headquarters? So they're doing this in-between thing where what they want to do is just throw mud in the water. So you really don't know what the truth is. You don't know, do we have a secret space program? What is it? So you're leaking the story that this is for real, that there are ETs, there's some program where nobody can really figure out what's going on. And that's what the disinformation is, just to keep people off balance, but you still have to tell the story. So they're leaking little bits and pieces of the story in the disinformation. And when you come up against, when you come up against things like nuclear weapons, that's when they make a move, because that's something, it's cattle mutilations, nuclear weapons is stuff they don't want you to know about. And the prime example everybody uses for the disinformation thing is the Richard Doty, Paul Benowitz thing. And the story is, they go and they Bill Moore and they basically killed this guy and they drove him nuts and whatever. And this evil government thing, and everybody forgets how the story started, what the actual story was. The story was that Paul Benowitz, a top scientist, has a factory, or he has a lab at the edge of Kirtland Air Force Base. And he's making reports that there are UFOs over the Manzano nuclear weapons storage area, the biggest repository for nuclear weapons in the world. That's his report. That's what he's putting out. And he's saying there are UFOs over the nuclear weapons. That's a story they don't want out. Same as they don't want the nuclear weapon connection to Manitoba or to nuclear weapons bases or to cattle mutilations. That's a story. They don't want that connection because that's compartmentalized, so they have to change the story. So they go in and they throw mud in the water. They make them think, that there's underground bases, and they throw all this stuff, and nobody knows what the truth is. And that's how they do it. So they keep everybody off guard. Nobody knows what's true, what's not true, and it's always plausible deniability. It's like the president. The president is always going to be plausible deniability. I say the president is running the show, but they want it plausible deniability. So if it comes to being with the Russians, or negotiating with the Russians while you're running, that you're never gonna nail them on that, except with a lot of effort, or Iran-Contra, or Whitewater, or any of these things. When it's a bad story, the president is an idiot. He doesn't know what's going on. There's this plausible deniability. It's everybody under him is doing it. He's not doing anything. When it's a good story, then it's the president. So you have this plausible deniability. Same as Ron Pandolfi. Ron Pandolfi leaks material, but he's never on tape. He's never see an email. And you can go to him at any time. Like when the story came out that he had briefed Donald Trump, Steve Bassett found out. Steve Bassett phones up and he said, I heard you briefed Donald Trump. And he said, no, didn't brief him, hung up the phone. And that's the thing. So he leaks the story that he briefed Donald Trump, and then when people try to confirm it, nope, never happened. Dan Smith's making up stories. Nope, none of this happened. And that's, to me, is how they're doing it. They just want everybody off balance. They want everybody talking about it because that raises consciousness, and they want everybody not knowing what's real, what's not real. And that protects the classified stuff, because the classified stuff is the consciousness aspect of this thing. The fact that aliens are telepathic, and the whole thing that you can get into somebody's head, the whole idea that we can fly a ship with your mind, because what they want is this symbiotic thing with aircraft, where you can put a pilot inside a plane, and he can fly the plane with his mind. He doesn't have to think. He doesn't have to do whatever. He just can go around. So there's a lot of military technology that they are trying to protect, because when you're the military, it comes down to we need an enemy. We got enemies all over the place: North Korea and Middle East and Venezuela and the Mexicans and the Chinese and the Canadians, and it goes on, because that's, if you're in the military business, you want to protect your budget. You want to get your budget bigger. You want more things. You need an enemy. So that's the way I look at this leaking thing. That, to me, it's very clear. When I wrote Managing Magic, I go year after year after year after year, and it's the same thing. They do it over and over again. Walt Disney, Bob Emenegger, the MJ12 document, and then even the other MJ12. So people say, oh, MJ12's phony. I say, but you're forgetting the fact there's 3,700 pages of MJ12 documents. This is not one guy hoaxing documents. This is an organization, and they're doing it for a reason. They want these ideas to sort of float around. Everybody says it's a hoax. Everybody reads the documents. They read about all these different programs and stuff, and nobody can confirm the programs, but people are thinking about it. And that's, to me, simple to me, was what they were doing.
They've militarized the medical technology as well for their soldiers and for their own use, and denied it to the public as well. And of course, the monopolies, the drug company monopolies and so forth, want to keep it that way.
Yeah, you can even see. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, okay. What's interesting is that in these 20 and back programs is that these super soldiers, or just people that have been abducted and used in the military programs, they encounter in dangerous situations. They can have their limbs blown off and, severely damaged, and they are simply retrieved and they wake up and they're whole again. Their arm is back, their head's back sewn on, all kinds of bizarre things happen. And apparently we have these technologies which are way in advance of what's out there in the world right now, the regular technologies, medical technologies and procedures that the real world has. So they're repressing all this information, and we have the ability to live extremely long lives and to be regressed. Apparently they take these people for 20 years, they regress them back to the age when they left, they return them, 10 minutes after they were taken, and they're back in their younger bodies, but they remember the 20 years of experiences, and it affects them psychologically and emotionally, either on a deep repressed level until finally it bleeds through into their daily lives, or they'll have something that happens and the whole thing opens up and they remember it all in cascades, like the Russian dolls, and they're going, now what do I do with this? I remember this entire experience that is just so far out there. Who in the world's going to believe me? But we keep getting these people. It's amazing. Apparently it started with Eisenhower. That was part of that agreement.
Yeah, so that's part of it. Underneath, besides the withholding of the technology, medical and military, there's also the conscious murder that the presidents have engaged in, allowing it to happen. Eisenhower ordering Patrice Lumumba murdered. The CIA killing Allende in Chile, and it goes on and on. They put up of the 911, which were people were sacrificed so that we would be brought in by this false flag incident, and it goes on. So that's what's under it: the ongoing murder and kidnap of ordinary people by the criminals that run the country. That's what I think.
Yeah, the way I always look at it is to me, everything is one thing: separation versus oneness. You either believe that everybody is one, or you believe in separation. So you basically, if you're in the military, you believe in separation. You believe there are evil guys out there, the same as they the North Koreans think that we're evil. The Middle East think that we're the great Satan. And it's so everybody has this perspective is when you see somebody else as evil, then you can kill them. You can steal their stuff. You can do whatever. If you suddenly realize that this person is part of you, or this Sherry Wilde talks about in the book we're about to publish, this Nancy Tremaine's book. They basically it's the same thing. The number one lesson that every time the alien is teaching is this oneness lesson. Look in the mirror. We are you. And the lesson they showed for Sherry Wilde was with her father, where they bring her and her father sitting at a kitchen table, and she says, "What are you showing me this for?" And she's up above her father and behind with the aliens. And he said, "Just watch, just watch." And then the father is sitting at the kitchen table, and he takes this fork with his right hand and drives it into his left hand, and the blood shooting up all over the place. She's saying, "What did you show me that for? What did you do that for?" And he said, "Well, that's the lesson of oneness. What you do to someone else, you might as well do to yourself." And this is this idea that the world works on this idea of separation, that there are evil people out there. And to me, everybody's just changing the noun. So whether it's Chinese or Jews or whatever thing you say is these are the evil people and we got to kill them. And to me, it's all one. It's all the same thing. And that everybody, it's like the Bible says, all have fallen short of the glory of God, that everybody has this, the good and the bad and this sort of thing. And the military will play on this sort of thing. So the military is in the idea of protecting us. It's like we're these poor souls and there's these evil people out there all around the world and we have to be protected. And people will buy into this thing every single time. And that's why you have, if you look at Annie Jacobson, who just came out with this book called Phenomena, and she wrote the book called DARPA, the book on DARPA, and that what we'd done with UFOs. In 1990, I wrote about DARPA and the Jasons, and now it's like she's going to win, she almost won the Pulitzer Prize for this same story I did in 1990 about the fact that DARPA has this $3 billion budget. And the way it works with them is you follow a pattern. Because I was in the government and I know how this works is you follow a pattern and it's the same pattern all the time. So if someone says put people in the gas chamber, everybody just salutes and does what they're told. And everybody's doing their own little job the best they can. And you have this situation where she talks about the fact that the way it worked in World War II is we won the war because we developed the atomic bomb, proximity fuse, plastic explosives, and all this sort of stuff. And that stuff all gradually floated into the general public, like GPS. GPS is a military technology, and everybody, you would not live without GPS now. That's the part of our life, cell phones. That was all military technology. And so the way they work is because it worked so well during World War II is you have this creation. And then when the Soviets put up Sputnik, and we were sort of embarrassed by the fact they beat us into outer space, they created DARPA. And the reason DARPA was that we will never again be taken by surprise by another evil foreign nation. And DARPA has a $3 billion budget. And the stuff you're talking about with the super soldiers, Annie Jacobson talks about. She says their job, their motto is we are to turn science fiction into fact. And they have these things where they have this program and they have a $3 billion budget. They have 120 project managers, which means that every project manager has $100 to $150 million project as funding. And that's just for research. You can buy up labs. You can basically control anything you want. And they're working on people growing arms and stuff like this. And she knows from the people she's talked to, and she talks about all this technology and how that's the way they see it. And they think they're saving the world. Everybody thinks they're saving the world. So they think they've got this technology. Right. They'll develop the military stuff, and then it'll gradually filter down into the public, which is what has happened. A lot of the stuff that we've got, Teflon, all this stuff is military technology that gradually floated into the community. So that's their thing, and it worked. We won the war with it. We nobody can challenge us in the world now. We have the ultimate technology. And the thing is, well, why would they change that? Because they see they're saving the world. We're the good guys, and we have to have the technology. We can't let the bad guys have the UFO technology or the mine technology and stuff. We need it. We're the good guys, and there's bad guys out there. So when it comes down to some guy in another country is seen to be an enemy, we have the right and the justification because we are the good guys. We are the light on the hill. We are God's chosen race. We have the right to go and kill those people. And that's the way it works. So, and until you have the end of separation, the belief in separation, you will always have war, you will always have killing, and we will destroy the world. And I maintain this now, that we have not got off this thing of separation. All we do is change the noun. Everybody's got a different person who's evil, and we got to stop this group or this person or this country or whatever. And as long as we believe in separation, the world will end. We are going to end the world, because you cannot, unless you understand that everybody's one, that we are all the same thing, we're all part of each other, and stop killing and stealing and maiming and whatever, the world is finished.
So I agree, and I think that we created this polarity for the acceleration of consciousness. There's a wonderful book by Russell Brininger called Overlords of the Singularity, and it's about this whole concept that we always need to have an enemy. And so when you go into the secret space program, the enemy is the reptilians, but then they go to a higher level. No, the reptilians are part of the alliance. The enemy is all this wolfen creature that comes in and destroys planets. So the story keeps getting at a bigger level. We keep creating Star Wars and Star Trek, and it may not end with the end of the world. It may, as we reached this end of this drama, we do have a chance of turning around and feeling our oneness. And that's one of the things we're working on. Sasha, what did you want to say?
Well, from the perspective of existential field theory, I start with myself, and I say that the things that bug me about other people, or I overly admire in other people, are the underdeveloped parts of myself. So when we apply that kind of a principle to the world, we can say the highest aspirations of every people's can be synergized, and especially if we look at needs. What is it that people need? The Munich murderers that killed the Israeli athletes many years later were seen to have settled down. They weren't terrorists anymore. They had families. They had jobs. They had respect. And so that's it. If we can just see what the needs that motivate the unreasonable demands that people make, I think there is a basis for unity. And the basis is it's empathy, basically, what Jesus was saying. You just feel the love for everyone and everything.
So you have the Houston event, and they have people that, a week before, 2 weeks before, we had this polarity going with the extreme racist events the weekend before. And then you have Houston, where all these people are coming together, immigrants that are defying, that they would get taken across the border, and all different races, and they're coming into people's homes, and they're taking people out in their nightgowns and rescuing them. So there are times when we realize that we're one, because on the highest level we are one. We are everything and everything in it, and it's all self and reflected in a apparent other in polarity, but everything is within us. We're owning it or projecting it and rejecting it and demonizing it and defining it, but eventually we become conscious, and it's Om Namah Shivaya, and everything is one, and I'm everything.
And I want to say one that I'm really feeling right now is about our dreamer children here in the United States. These are American children, and we've got to keep them here. Okay. Don't let Trump send them out.
That's really cool.
Yeah, that's the thing. You get to that whole thing where dreamer children become evil. I mean, and people sort of buy into this, and everybody sort of, jumps on the bandwagon, and they're just ordinary people. They work the same as you and I. They have, dreams and aspirations. And in Canada, we look at them the other way. It's like, oh my goodness, we should get these people. I mean, these are fantastic. I mean, we can give them the jobs. It's like, and you see it completely different. It's through whose eyes are you seeing the whole thing? That people always have to have the empathy thing, or to see the other side. That when you see the enemy, that they have kids as well, and that they actually believe they're saving the world too. You see it from their perspective, and everybody doesn't. They just sort of it's all about ego. It's about me, and it's sad, but that's our message is the oneness thing. And I didn't realize that. I mean, in UFOs. That's where I sort of make a joke where people think, if you go to a UFO conference, they think we're talking, sharing flying saucer pictures and stories about flying saucers. And it's never about that. It's always about these kind of discussions we're having right now, is what is reality? What is the world all about? What is the basis of philosophy and what's right, what's wrong and stuff. And it's never about UFOs. It always comes down to this, almost like a discussion about God every time. It just gets there right away.
Yeah, so with the Houston, the day workers, there's no more day workers. You go pick them up, and there's not enough. And they're saying, okay, we need more immigrants because we don't have enough people to build this town back, and we're not going to be able to do it with more people coming in. So that's where you really, when you get down to the core, can I get my house rebuilt? Who's going to save me? Then all that stuff fades, and you really do see the oneness. And that's why I think that we can do this. And as an experiencer, I saw the end of the world. They showed me it, right? When I was 4, I was on a ship, and I've seen 24 different potential multiverses realities that, there's actually much more, but that are the highest probabilities for humanity to embrace. And, it's not an absolute. It's not written in stone. That's right. It may be different for every individual that experiences. Somebody may want to experience, their world ending in the being blown into stardust and their soul disintegrated or whatever. And somebody will experience, this higher level consciousness and utopia. What did you want to say, Sasha? You were over here. No. Okay.
Yeah. Another point that deals with this is other idea, that the idea of evil. That you think that something is evil, like the emergence of Trump, and then you look at the other side and you say, well, maybe this is something we manifested. Maybe this is something that we actually brought to wake up the world. That everybody's fallen asleep, and this guy will actually wake up everybody, stir up everybody, and because I did political studies when I was at university, and it was I took the communist Marxist stuff, and it was the thesis and antithesis, the pendulum, that it goes far right, far left, and it goes back and forth, and that you think these things are evil, and yet they are actually teaching lessons that it will shift back exactly as hard the other way, and that we never progress in a straight line. We progress back, forth. Like you're conservative, your kids are very liberal, their kids are very conservative, and everybody hates their parents' ideas and stuff like that. And things are shifting, and we think it's like a steady progression, and it's not. It's almost like there's some sort of hand behind this that is helping develop this stuff. And we sort of think, we look from day to day, and we see today, and we don't realize that over a period of time that the world is actually evolving. It's getting better than it was, 200 years ago, when you could have slaves and women couldn't vote, and you could castrate a gay guy and stuff like that. And we sort of see it in a different perspective. So it always comes down to whose eyes are we looking through, and are we looking at a 100-year period or a 1,000-year period, or are we looking at today, and we're just worried about today, and it has to be solved today. Because in the end, the universe is unlimited, and if we are eternal beings, we got forever to figure this thing out, and it's a progression, and we should sort of enjoy the ride. And what it comes down to me is, it really doesn't matter to me what anybody else really does, because I really can't change very much about what anybody else does. All I can do is realize that if reincarnation is a fact, and we always leave this out in the UFO world, and I say if reincarnation is a fact, then everything in the UFO world changes, because then everything becomes experience and it becomes soul contract. That I agreed, my belief is I agreed to come into this world to do something. And all I have to do is figure out, what the hell am I supposed to do, and am I doing it? And when we get finished, they'll ask me, how did I make out? And what everybody else does really is irrelevant, because I can't, when I die, I can't say, if I didn't get disclosure, I would have done something. I didn't do anything, but, they didn't give me disclosure. If I got disclosure, if Trump hadn't been elected, or my mother-in-law, or the dog ate my homework, and all these sort of things, it basically comes down to, what am I supposed to do? And am I doing it? That's all that really matters in this world. And my thing is the message of oneness, which I didn't know in 75, and to me is the number one message, is the separation versus oneness. That is perhaps what I think I should just be talking about all the time.
Right.
It's interesting. It's like it's beyond figuring out in a way. The part that figures out is less than the experiential part that includes the figure out. Yeah. And that's, to me, is where the experiencers come in, is that if you want to know what the path is, you've got to listen. If you believe that the intelligence behind the phenomena is a little bit smarter than us, and you see, what are they telling people? So that's where I sort of got into this thing where I said, well, we'll help these people publish these books,
people who, have a story, like Nancy Tremaine has this bizarre story, and she's, of course, dealing with reptilians. And of course, the first question I say, well, everybody says reptilians are evil. What do you say? And she's like, absolute nonsense. And she goes into her story, and she has this very clear recollection of her life and these experiences she's had. She's working on her second book and this sort of stuff. And basically say, have you written it down? Which I say to every experiencer, have you written it down? Have you written it down for your children and grandchildren or whatever? And because that's very therapeutic to write it down, and you start getting flashbacks, and you start to realize, this is important. And almost all the experiencers say the same thing. Yeah, they've sort of written it down, but they don't know what to do with it. So I say, well, I'll show you how to publish a book. I'll just lead you through it. Won't take any money. I'll just show you how to do it. And that's what I've decided now to do is get these very, very bizarre stories and get these people and say, you have a platform. And because I'll ask every experiencer, and Janet can say this. I mean, you've been in the room where these experiencers are, at Laughlin or at Phoenix or whatever, and you say, do you think you have a mission? And they all go, yeah, I think so. I don't know what it is, but yeah. Everybody thinks they have a mission. They have something to do. And it's to try to help them get on that path and do whatever that mission is. And I find that, to me, is very therapeutic, and I feel good by doing it. Is for whatever reason they got stuck in my way, and so I have Nancy's book, and then we have this guy, and no, you weren't in Toronto. This guy whose band was abducted in 1972 in St. Catharines.
Him.
Yeah, have you interviewed him?
And they didn't want him to take it.
Yeah, and then they abduct the entire audience. It's just the most riveting story. And I said, have you written this down? And he said, well, yeah, some of it. And I said, well, if you get a book, come, we'll show you how to publish the book. And he's an artist, and just you see these stories where people are running around with these stories, and like you guys know, because you're in these experiencer meetings, at Phoenix, where there's like 150 people, and everybody's got one of these stories where you go like, wow, it's like unbelievable, story. And I think people should hear these stories, that get as many of these things out. And to me, that would raise consciousness. Plus, it gives these people some sort of method, because it was the same with Chris Bledsoe. When Chris Bledsoe was first abducted, he was a very religious guy, and his world was shattered. I mean, he wanted, take me out of here. I mean, I can't live anymore. And then suddenly he gets regressed, and suddenly he realizes he's got this mission, and now you can't shut the guy up. He's running around, he's saving the world, and he's like, and that's what you need more of these people who suddenly realize that they have some sort of message for the world, and help them put it out there.
Send them our way, because we would love to interview more and more of them. It's absolutely fascinating for me. Every time I'll let you talk in just a minute, honey. Every time I hear it, I get more of my story. It's like we trigger each other.
Yeah.
We remember things, have the big aha. And I wrote my story, but I realized when I was writing my story, I was censoring things. I wasn't real comfortable coming out 100%. That was a few years back. But the more people come out with their story, the stories, the more that I feel that I get it out of myself, and I can help other people get it out of themselves. So please send them our way. We would love to interview them. They don't even have to use their real name, but I really encourage people to be who you really are, and who you are is as an experiencer that has these experiences. And ultimately, it doesn't matter that people, shame and blame and reject us, because we're going to reach critical mass, and it's just like, I knew that. People are going to turn around and say, oh yeah, I knew it was going on all along. But right now, they're still in that polarizing, rejecting. But there's more and more people every day that are coming on board the bandwagon and going, yes, there's something going on.
But the people that are rejecting it are the people, like I say, like they're, you're in the lab, and you're having the experience, and these people are outside smoking, or they've skipped school that day or whatever, and then they come and try to tell you what happened in the lab. They're really not involved. If you go into the meetings, and you know what it's like when you go to Phoenix, and there's like 175 people in the room, and you start hearing these people one after another for 5 minutes. This story, you're going like, wow, I didn't realize it was this many or this extensive, these stories. You're just going like, and those people have not seen that. They have not been in that room to see that kind of interaction where these people are crying and they're telling their story, and it's like, wow. I mean, I can sort of sympathize with people on the outside because we all have these relatives and friends or whatever who think you're totally crazy, but they don't know. I mean, it's like Jesus said, forgive them for they know not what they do. I mean, they're totally lost. They have no idea. And I sort of have some compassion for them. If they were in that room in Phoenix and saw that kind of event where these people are talking, and you're going like, how can you deny this when you hear these stories of these people? There's nobody making up anything in that room. And there's so much emotion and such bizarre, wonderful stories of this interaction, and that kind of stuff was not in the Charlie Red Star book. We really didn't have any of that kind of stuff. There was none of this sort of experiencer type stuff for people with flashbacks and stuff like that. It was straight out UFO sightings. It was aliens walking around outside crafts. It was landings, close up encounters, stuff like that. But the world has changed, and it's almost like if you remember Barbara Lamb. Barbara Lamb tells the story that she, in the 1980s, she had no interest in UFOs, and she's doing this hypnosis training, and she's in the final course of this hypnosis training, and suddenly this voice in the back of her head says, "Listen carefully, Barbara, you're going to be doing this." And she goes, "Oh, that's weird. That's weird." And she said within 2 weeks, the first abductee comes to her and says, "Oh, I would like to be regressed." And suddenly she's this major person, same as Mary Rodwell tells us the same story. She reads John Mack's book and then Bud Hopkins' book, and within a week or 2 weeks, the first experiencer comes to her. It's almost like this is all sort of planned, and the more these people come out, the more people who do regressions, the more people come out with their story, the more you're going to get this critical mass where it suddenly become accepted that these kind of events are taking place.
Well, we're electronically like the old time Quakers in Maryland who would get out in the middle of the town square and say, "I can't stand it, the way people are being treated here. I got to speak out. You may not want to hear what I've got to say, but this is wrong." And only John Quincy Adams among our presidents and Abraham Lincoln were able to really stand up and say that too. And that's what we are. That's what the mission is. The mission is to tell our truth.
Yeah. And people don't realize that in previous times that it wasn't easy for the people who had it. I was just listening to some podcasts, and there was one about Martin Luther King, that actually it was Kennedy and Kennedy and Robert Kennedy who actually authorized the tapping of his phone, and that's when they caught him having sex with all these different women, and they sent him this message that he should commit suicide. He should kill himself. And so people don't realize that he had this very tough time, and he ends up at 39 years old getting shot or whatever. And yet 40 years later, his message is out there, and everybody knows what that message is. And you don't see it in the time that you're in. You think, well, we're not getting anywhere, nothing's happening, whatever. And we don't realize that all this stuff will be put into books, and people will realize that this was right, and it's all part of what we have to do. That at the time when it's happening, it looks like it's not working. It looks like a tough life. And, Mother Teresa or any of these things, I mean, that wasn't an easy life. But she, I do the download thing where she gets contacted by Jesus 4 times, and she basically tells him to go to hell at one point and, pick somebody else. I'm not worthy or whatever. And so it was not an easy life for her to, give up, because she was apparently fairly well off and had a good life, whatever, to suddenly go and give this up. And it's after you're dead and gone that what you did sort of gets out there. It takes a while for it to sort of go down into society, but we're all doing our little bit. And we have to realize that in the end, it will all pay off, that we just do what we can and do the best job we can.
Well, it's maybe not what our result is, but that the goal is the path and how we walk it.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think that's where you and I and all these people, that when you go to these conferences, that this is our family, because you can relate to these people, and everybody's, talking the same way, and everybody's, realizes there's something important that has to be done and stuff like that. And on the outside, everybody thinks it's like a flying saucer convention, where, and it's not. It's like the people that in the UFO community become your most important allies in life, and you have this camaraderie, and it's almost like like the early, African American movement or the anti-Vietnam War movement, where you become empowered by being with the people that you're around, and you realize that you have a mission, and it doesn't really matter what anybody says. You're going to stand up and do it because you believe it to be right.
It's like the Waldesians and the Cathars. We sort of are living it in our own community. We're living community.
Yeah. So
I get stuck with one story. What I went to go back, that it was Sherry Wild. The father shoved a knife into his own hand.
Stuck a fork into his hand.
Fork into his hand. What was that about?
Well, it was basically this is the lesson of oneness. What you do to someone else, you might as well do to yourself. Because she said that she had 3 lessons. The being that she was dealing with was called Da. And she said from the time that she was about 5 years old, he said, "Okay, Sherry, what are the three main lessons of life?" And one was, we are all one. The second one was we are multidimensional beings living in multiple lives, or something like that. And the third was control your thoughts. So those are the 3 things. So every time they say, "Okay, Sherry, what are the 3 main lessons of life?" And she would have to repeat these things about the oneness thing. So she was shown this analogy about the oneness thing, about how what you do to someone else, you might as well just do to yourself, because you are one with them, and you think that they're separate from you, and it doesn't affect you, but it does affect you. That we're all part of the same thing, and that does make the ultimate sense. Is that if you absolutely believe, not just in theory or in saying it or whatever, but you actually believe that everything is one, the plants, everything is connected, that you are all one, then you work towards making it a better place. Or the thing was, well, why would aliens come here? Well, because they're not capitalists, because they're not into the separation and into let's kill, rape, kill, pillage, and steal. They're into the thing is, if you're like an advanced spiritual being, say an angel, well, that's what you do. You work towards the one. You want the one to become bigger. You want the one to become better. You're working towards the one. You're not into going and stealing somebody's stuff or killing somebody or whatever like that. Right. So that's the whole idea of oneness, that if you really honestly believe it, there cannot be war. There cannot be evil in the world, as far as I can see it, if you really seriously believe that everything is part of you and you are part of everything else.
In a way, the Borg makes it like it's a pejorative thing. But if you look at the principle of taking the particular contribution that every variety can give to the whole, and how it keeps getting complexer, and it's an interesting idea. It doesn't have to be pejorative like that.
Yeah. The other analogy that I had is I'm starting to do these little 10-minute YouTube things rather than long lectures and stuff, because most people now have the attention span of about 10 minutes, and that 10 minutes, that makes sense. That we'll do these little, like, one question, and one question I was going to do, and I've actually written about it, is, are the aliens commies? And it's like, well, yeah, sort of. I mean, they're like a hive, and so you look at a hive, and then the hive works like everybody. It's like the idea of a commune or a kibbutz or something like that. You put in what you can contribute and take out what you need. And so everybody in the hive is working. Everybody's doing what they're supposed to do to increase the hive. The hive is the most important thing, and there is not this ego. And whereas we have the ego thing where, we want to take as much of the hive and control it ourselves or something like that. So it's this idea that's one of the reasons why the American public is not going to be very happy if this does shake down, is that in the 1950s, you remember when Adamski and Williamson and all these guys were running around with their message, they were investigated by the FBI as being communist agents, because that was sort of the message. It was like this, oh, we should all be one, we should all share, they should all be equal and all this kind of stuff. And they're going like, this guy's a commie. And that's what you see in the sort of, you get the ship where everybody's doing their job, everybody's doing their working, and there really is no material thing. Like, there's no designer clothes, there's no leather furniture, there's no jewelry, there's nothing that we would really identify as being ego things. It's more like a beehive where everybody's doing their job, and everybody's working towards the thing. And that's not going to go over well in American society. You think that they think the Mexicans and the Chinese are enemies. You can imagine what Trump will think when he suddenly realizes that these guys are for real and on the scene, and they want everybody to be equal. The way we have it now is, got 8 people in the world own half of everything in the world. That's the way we want it. And those 8 people are going to try to get the rest of it. And they want the rich people to continue to control. And the end message of the UFO thing is going to be much different than a couple of rich people owning the world.
The one thing I think that is really interesting is that the communist country that really seems to work, Cuba, where everyone's educated, no one's hungry, there's hardly any crime. It's a society that works, and instead of just fearing labels thrown on, like we could really look at just what is being advocated, which is housing, education, and health for everybody.
Exactly.
And I was on a military base, and they act like a hive. If you don't act as one when you're on a remote location, you're not going to survive.
Yeah.
You don't have anybody with you. So people that are on like an aircraft carrier, or they're out in space in the space program, and they're on these isolated planets and craft, they have to act like one. So that's just a negative pejorative.
Exactly. Even my kid was a very good hockey player, and of course the line always was with the hockey team is there's no I in team. And that's the way it works. It's the same thing with a hockey team or a football team or whatever. If you are one, if you're all working together, you're very productive. But if you start having divisions inside the team where everybody's working on ego, the whole thing collapses. And you need that thing. It's almost like a proven system that the more you work together, the more the thing progresses. And when there's division, me versus you, good versus bad, then you start getting this, killing, and we start picking up who are the people that we need to put in the gas chamber, who needs to go to Guantanamo Bay without any civil rights and lawyers and this sort of thing. And we start doing that kind of stuff because we actually believe that there is separation, that there are people that need to go to Guantanamo. There are people that need to go into the gas chamber. And we start to actually believe this kind of stuff, that we aren't one, that there are good people and we're the good people and we're always the good people. We're the guys saving the world. And there's these bad people that we have to put down.
So at the end of this month, I think it's the 23rd, Star Trek is finally back after 12 years. And in the Star Trek reality, we have a universal, the planet has a president. The world is united as one. It's one government. And then that representative goes into the Federation of Planets. So we have a role model of this unity consciousness coming together, working in cooperation, and yet, so let's.
But that's
how can we do this? Yeah.
Right. That's the thing. That's the thing. That's when I talk about disclosure. Why you're not getting the government's fighting the disclosure thing is because I'm a Canadian, so I see it a little bit different. I'm not an American, and you're not going to sell us to the United States of America. I mean, it's like the United States of America. We're going to have one world government, but the United States is going to run it. And the idea that there's always this antagonism against the United Nations, like we're going to be like the rest of the world. No, we're Americans. And that's going to be a very hard sell to the United States of America. To Canada, it's like, yeah, okay, let's all be one. Like, we don't really care. I mean, to us, it's like, don't vote. It just encourages them. I mean, nobody really is into the political thing. But in America, it's very patriotic. It's like, we're special. We're the light of the hill, on the hill, and all this sort of stuff. And if you get this idea that it's going to be one world with no rich people, where everybody is, the poor are taken care of, you don't have 65 million refugees wandering the world without a place to put their head, without a place to call home, where everybody just says, get out of here, go and die, get out of my country, that sort of thing, where you're going to put that kind of stuff. I mean, that's going to be a hard sell to a very capitalist country, whether it's Great Britain or the United States, because you have this ego identity that I'm a special person. I'm better than my country's first. It's like we got to win the gold medals in the Olympics and stuff. And that is pressed on us all the time, is this nationalism. And it's almost like this story. The nationalism is the last refuge of scoundrels. And that's what's going to come down to, is that you're going to have a very hard time selling the idea of oneness in the world. Some countries will accept it, but some countries, nationalism is the only game in town.
Sasha wants to say
Colonel Ware was telling me about one of his informants. He goes by the name of John Leach in Genesis for the Space Age, talks about how Roosevelt in his last days, when the United States was absolutely the number one only power left, wanted to be president of the world, the new United Nations, and made a deal with Joe Stalin that he would be the prime minister. And he was actually making arrangements like that. And the Joint Chiefs, in telling you got to share these secrets with the Russians and blah, blah, the Joint Chiefs were stalling him. And Roosevelt died before he could actually do any damage. But they said the old man was crazy and he wanted to be the one to bring it all together.
Yeah. And that.
He just had his time.
What's that?
What, do you have documents on that?
No, I don't. No, I don't. That would be an interesting set of documents. That's for sure. That's the kind of stuff they would be burning for sure. I mean, in order to, because you want to keep the status quo going. I mean, if you have the power and the money, I mean, you're going to work to get more. That's a whole idea. The 8 people control half the resources in the world, and they're not about to stop. It's a game. It's like, can we get it all? And how do you turn that around? How do you turn around a situation where some people have all the money? They're going to be very unwilling to give back the money. And now we're writing in the laws so that they will keep the money, so that they'll actually get more money. And then it's very hard to reverse laws. You can't get anything passed in Washington now. Everything's just completely come to a standstill. And the people who know how to manipulate the system are manipulating the system.
We're almost out of time. We want you to tell everybody about how to find your books and everything.
The books are at Amazon is the Charlie Red Star book. And if they want to get hold of me, whitehouseuFO@gmail.com. I have a big mailing list here that's getting bigger all the time. If they want to watch an actual event where they're talking about portals and disclosure, whitehouseuFO@gmail, and I will respond to them. Thanks.
Thank you, Grant. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Enjoyed it a lot.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Who owns you? If you're not in control, then someone else is. Join me, Ivy West, for Voices on the Wind, Saturday from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern in Studio A. I discuss government, health, metaphysics, suppressed science, universal mysteries, little-known incredible facts, alternative energies, and even more than you can imagine. Won't you join us on Revolution Radio Saturdays from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern for Voices on the Wind with me, Ivy